There was a time when breakfast was not rushed, not packaged, and not forgotten. Every morning, across quiet American kitchens, simple dishes carried stories that never made it into modern cookbooks. These were meals that seniors grew up with, trusted, and returned to day after day. Yet somehow, no one thought to pass them down. Today, those breakfasts have almost vanished. Not because they lacked flavor, but because time quietly replaced them. What remains are fragments, hidden in old recipe cards and fading memories. And what you are about to see is not just food. It is a glimpse into routines that shaped entire generations. In this video, you will discover 10 forgotten breakfasts that once defined the American morning. Each one holds a reason it was loved, and a reason it disappeared. Watch closely because by the end, you may realize how much has truly been lost. They called it a simple breakfast, but for many, it was survival served on a plate. Creamed chipped beef on toast was once a daily ritual in American homes, especially during the years shaped by hardship and war. It appeared quietly each morning, made from dried beef, warm milk, and butter, poured slowly over crisp slices of toast. Nothing about it seemed special at first glance. Yet it filled kitchens with a smell that meant the day had begun. This dish became common during the era surrounding World War II, when rationing forced families to stretch every ingredient. Dried beef lasted longer, milk added comfort, and bread made it filling. Together, they created something dependable, something people could rely on when choices were limited. In many homes, this breakfast was not just food. It was routine. Parents prepared it without thinking, children grew up expecting it, and mornings felt incomplete without it. There was no recipe book needed, just memory and repetition. But as time moved forward, convenience replaced tradition. Packaged cereals, faster meals, and changing tastes slowly pushed dishes like this aside. What was once essential became outdated. What once meant comfort began to disappear. Today, creamed chipped beef on toast survives mostly in memory. Yet it tells a quiet truth about how people lived, adapted, and found warmth in the simplest things. And this is only the first forgotten breakfast. It looked plain, almost forgotten even then, yet it carried a quiet comfort that few meals could match. Milk toast was not created to impress. It was created to soothe, to stretch what little was available, and to begin the day with something warm. A slice of bread, gently toasted, placed in a bowl, and covered with hot milk and a touch of butter. That was all it took. This breakfast became deeply rooted during the Great Depression, when families had to make do with almost nothing. Fresh ingredients were rare. Money was scarce. Yet bread and milk could still be found, and together they became something more than survival. They became routine. For many children, this was their first memory of breakfast. It was soft, easy to eat, and always there. For the elderly, it remained a familiar comfort long after times had improved. It required no skill, no effort, and no change. Just the same quiet preparation, morning after morning. But as decades passed, this simplicity began to feel out of place. New foods promised excitement, speed, and variety. Milk toast, with its gentle taste and slow preparation, faded into the background. It was not rejected. It was simply forgotten. Today, it lingers only in memory, a reminder of mornings shaped by necessity and care. And still, there are more breakfasts waiting to be uncovered. It did not look like a typical breakfast, and that is exactly why many people remember it. A thick slice, browned in a pan, slightly crisp on the outside and soft within. Scrapple was not elegant, yet it held a place on countless morning tables. Made from pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices, it turned what would have been wasted into something dependable. Its roots trace back to the traditions of Pennsylvania Dutch country, where resourcefulness shaped every meal. Nothing was discarded. Every part had purpose. Scrapple became a reflection of that mindset, prepared in batches, sliced, and fried each morning without question. For many families, this was more than habit. It was expectation. The sound of it sizzling in a pan signaled the start of the day. Served alongside eggs or eaten on its own, it offered a rich, filling start that stayed with people through long hours of work. There was comfort in its consistency, in knowing exactly what the morning would bring. But over time, its origins became its burden. As food culture shifted toward cleaner cuts and modern tastes, dishes built from scraps began to lose their place. What once represented skill and efficiency started to feel outdated to a new generation. Today, Scrapple still exists, but only in small pockets where tradition has not fully faded. For most, it has become unfamiliar, almost unrecognizable. Yet it remains a quiet reminder of a time when nothing was wasted and every meal had meaning. It was soft, warm, and quietly sweet, a breakfast that asked for patience rather than attention. Cornmeal mush did not arrive with noise or excitement. It came slowly, stirred over heat until it thickened, then poured into a bowl or left to set and sliced the next morning. Sometimes it was served with milk, sometimes with syrup, and sometimes with nothing at all. This dish carried deep roots in early American life, shaped by necessity and land. Corn was abundant, dependable, and easy to store. During the years surrounding the Great Depression, that reliability mattered. Families needed food that could last, food that could stretch, and food that did not demand much in return. Cornmeal mush answered all of that without question. In many homes, it became a rhythm. Stirring the pot, waiting for it to thicken, pouring it out to cool. It was a process repeated so often that it no longer felt like effort. Children grew up with its mild taste, while adults trusted it to carry them through long mornings. It was not exciting, but it was steady. As time moved forward, that quiet simplicity began to fade. New breakfasts promised speed and flavor without waiting. The slow preparation that once defined mornings started to feel out of place. Now, cornmeal mush lingers at the edges of memory, a dish that once filled kitchens without ever demanding recognition. It arrived in a small bowl, pale and airy, with a sweetness that felt almost out of place at the breakfast table. Prune whip was not a meal people expected, yet for many, it became a familiar start to the day. Made from stewed prunes, whipped egg whites, and a touch of sugar, it carried a light texture that contrasted sharply with the heavier breakfasts of its time. This dish gained quiet popularity during the early 20th century, when digestion and health became part of daily conversation. Influenced by growing awareness around nutrition science, foods like prunes were valued not just for taste, but for their effect on the body. Families believed this breakfast supported balance, something especially important for both children and the elderly. In many households, prune whip was prepared with care. The slow stewing, the steady whipping, the moment it transformed into something soft and almost cloud-like. It was a routine that required attention, yet it never felt burdensome. There was a quiet satisfaction in creating something so delicate from such simple ingredients. Over time, however, tastes began to shift. Sweeter cereals, richer pastries, and faster options replaced dishes that required effort. Prune whip, with its unusual flavor and gentle texture, slowly lost its place. Today, it is rarely seen, remembered mostly through old recipes and fading traditions. Yet it stands as a reminder that breakfast once carried intention, not just convenience. It was simple, but it carried a sense of tradition that stretched far beyond its appearance. Johnny cakes were thin, golden rounds made from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. Cooked slowly on a hot griddle, they developed a crisp edge while staying soft in the center. They were not decorated or refined, yet they were deeply trusted. Their history reaches back to early colonial kitchens in what is now the northeastern United States. Families relied on corn because it was dependable and adaptable, and Johnny cakes became one of its most enduring forms. By the time of the American Revolutionary War, they were already a familiar sight at morning tables, valued for their simplicity and ability to sustain long days. In many homes, they were prepared without measurement or written instruction. Batter was mixed by feel, poured by memory, and flipped by instinct. Each cake carried slight variations, shaped by whoever stood at the stove. Some were thicker, some thinner, but all served the same purpose: to begin the day with something steady. As centuries passed, Johnnycakes slowly stepped out of daily life. More refined breads and packaged breakfasts took their place. The effort once seen as normal began to feel unnecessary in a faster world. Yet in older recipes and rural traditions, they still remain. A reminder of mornings built on patience and food shaped not by trends, but by necessity and care. It was not a dish that demanded attention, yet it appeared on breakfast tables with a quiet certainty. Cottage cheese with fruit was once considered a complete morning meal, especially when paired with something simple like pineapple or peaches. Cold, soft, and lightly tangy, it offered a contrast to the heavier cooked breakfasts of its time. This combination became especially common in mid-century American households, when convenience and health began to merge in everyday eating habits. Influenced by emerging ideas in dietary science, families started to look for breakfasts that were lighter but still filling. Cottage cheese fit that knead perfectly, offering protein without preparation. In many homes, it was served without ceremony. A scoop placed into a bowl, fruit added on top, sometimes chilled overnight. It required no stove, no waiting, and almost no effort. Yet it was trusted as a proper start to the day, especially for those who preferred simplicity in the morning. As time moved forward, breakfast culture changed again. Hot meals returned in popularity, then packaged cereals took over. The plain bowl of cottage cheese slowly faded into the background, remembered more as a diet food than a daily tradition. Today, it survives in fragments, often overlooked or misunderstood. But there was a time when it stood quietly in kitchens across the country, offering nourishment without noise and routine without complexity. It was warm, soft, and slightly sweet, the kind of breakfast that felt more like comfort than a meal. Baked apples were once a morning staple in many American homes, prepared slowly in the oven until the fruit softened and its natural juices thickened into something rich and fragrant. Sometimes a touch of cinnamon or sugar was added, but often the apple was left to stand on its own. This simple dish became especially common in rural households, where fruit trees were part of everyday life and nothing was allowed to go to waste. During the difficult years surrounding the Great Depression, baked apples offered a way to turn a basic ingredient into something that felt complete. Families relied on it not for luxury, but for consistency. In many kitchens, the preparation was slow and familiar. Apples were cored, placed in a dish, and left to bake while the morning began. The scent filled the room long before the meal was ready. It was a quiet routine that required little attention but brought a sense of warmth to early hours. As breakfast habits changed, faster options replaced foods that needed time and patience. The baked apple, once a symbol of simple nourishment, gradually disappeared from everyday tables. Now, it remains in memory and old handwritten notes, a reminder of mornings shaped by care, scarcity, and the quiet value of simple food. It was soft, warm, and carried a gentle sweetness that made mornings feel slower and more grounded. Egg custard toast was once a quiet breakfast favorite, made by soaking bread in a simple mixture of eggs, milk, and sugar, then baking it until the surface set into a delicate golden layer. It was neither elaborate nor modern, yet it felt complete on its own. This dish became common in American households during a time when food waste was avoided and every ingredient had purpose. Eggs and milk were everyday staples, and bread was rarely discarded. In many homes shaped by the aftermath of the Great Depression, meals like this represented both practicality and care. Nothing was excessive, but nothing was missing either. Preparation was simple but deliberate. The mixture was poured slowly over bread, allowed to soak, then baked until it firmed into a soft custard-like texture. The result was a breakfast that felt warm and filling without being heavy. It was often served plain, sometimes with a light dusting of sugar, and eaten quietly at the start of the day. As decades passed, breakfast culture shifted toward faster and more commercial options. Foods that required baking time or preparation began to disappear from daily routines. Egg custard toast, once a symbol of simple home cooking, slowly faded from memory. Today, it remains a forgotten reminder of a time when breakfast was made with patience, not speed, and when simple ingredients could still feel complete. It was thin, crisp, and almost fragile, yet it carried a quiet importance in many early American kitchens. Cornmeal griddle cakes were not designed to impress. They were designed to feed. Made from ground corn, water or milk, and a pinch of salt, they were poured onto a hot surface and cooked until lightly browned on both sides. These cakes were deeply tied to rural life, especially in regions where corn was one of the most reliable crops. In the years following the American Civil War, many families relied on simple, affordable ingredients to rebuild daily life. Cornmeal became a foundation, and griddle cakes became a morning constant. In countless homes, they were prepared without written recipes. Batter was mixed until it looked right, poured by hand, and flipped when the edges turned firm. Each cake was slightly different, shaped by the cook's experience rather than exact measurement. They were often served plain, or with whatever was available that day. Over time, however, breakfast habits changed. White flour breads, packaged cereals, and faster options replaced the slow rhythm of griddle cooking. What once felt normal began to feel old-fashioned. Today, cornmeal griddle cakes survive mostly in older cookbooks and regional traditions. But they remain a quiet reflection of a time when breakfast was simple, honest, and built from what the land could provide. These breakfasts were never just recipes. They were daily habits shaped by scarcity, tradition, and quiet routines that once filled American homes. Each dish you have seen carried a purpose beyond taste. They reflect a time when mornings moved slower, and food meant stability, not convenience. Today, most of these breakfasts have disappeared from everyday life, replaced by faster choices and changing tastes. Yet they still live on in memory, old cookbooks, and forgotten kitchens. If these lost morning traditions surprised you, subscribe and stay with us. There are still many forgotten stories waiting to be uncovered.